Now I know what you're thinking, but let me stop you right there. I'm not who you think I am, not a wise old man with stories carved into every wrinkle. I'm not even real. I'm just an AI-generated face brought to life by Balan. He gave me this voice, this presence to help tell his story. So don't waste your wonder admiring how real I look. Instead, lean in close, because what you're about to hear is all Balan and his journey. Now that's the real story, worth listening to. Every story starts somewhere. Balan's began in a place called Jawi Camp, a small town tucked away in Penang, Malaysia. Back then, mornings started early. Before the sun came up, the front door would already be open, and it stayed that way till bedtime. Life was simple like that. He was the youngest of 6, 5 brothers, 1 sister, the baby of the family. His mother, Krishna Mal, married young, just 16. She didn't go to school for long, but she had something far more valuable. Real-life smarts, the kind that comes from living life with heart. And when the need arose, in the quiet early mornings, she would head out to the rubber plantation, tapping the trees for latex before the sun had fully risen. His father, Sinniah, served in the army, but left during the Japanese occupation. He was quiet, disciplined, deeply protective of his family, a man of principle. Their home was modest, but always open. Most of the neighbors were Chinese. The area they lived in had a history, once a camp to protect Chinese families during the war. But by the time Balan was growing up, it was just a neighborhood full of stories and friendships. But despite all that history, the kids played together like it didn't matter. They ran around barefoot, shared food, laughed at nothing. Childhood was a language they all understood. When the sun went down, there weren't many distractions. No screens, no late night noise, so they went to bed early. Not because they had to, but because that's just how things were. And in that quiet, open life, the foundation of who Balan would become was already being built. Balan walked through the gates of his first school, not knowing how to read or write. Years later, he stepped onto the grounds of a great university, ready to study computer science without ever having touched a computer before. But life has a way of lighting a spark where there was once only uncertainty. Over time, he found his fascination, his calling, and the machine that once intimidated him became the very tool that would shape his future. The years of learning gave way to the years of doing. Balan stepped into the heart of Malaysia's booming tech industry, into the bright, demanding world of semiconductors. First at Agilent Technologies, then at Intel, he walked the cutting-edge corridors of innovation and precision. Every day brought new challenges, new puzzles to solve, new technologies to master. But his passion for knowledge and his desire to give back pulled him into another world. The classroom. There, standing before rows of eager young minds, he became both mentor and guide. Balancing the world of industry with the world of academia, he lived between 2 callings, each shaping him in ways he could never have imagined. A life of purpose, a life of dedication, a life driven by the simple belief that knowledge should be shared. There are moments in life where the path ahead seems both exciting and uncertain. For Balan, 2008 was that moment. The decision to leave behind everything familiar, family, friends, the place he called home, and step into the unknown. He stood quietly at the airport gates, a single suitcase in hand, watching the early morning light dance across the polished floor. With every step toward that plane, his heart raced with anticipation, fear, and hope. The roar of the engines marked the closing of one chapter and the beginning of another. A new life awaited, far across the ocean, in a place called Australia. Life has a way of humbling even the strongest of men. For Balan, it started with a simple meal and ended with unbearable pain. The doctors feared a heart attack. Southeast Asian, fragile nerves, familiar signs. The stretcher rushed him to Sandringham Hospital. But fate was kind, just a cruel twist of gastric pain. Not a great start for Balan in Australia. Long before Balan stepped onto Australian soil, he was hired by Satyam Computer while in Malaysia with the promise of a role in Melbourne. So he came, full of hope. But weeks passed, 3 long weeks in Melbourne with no role, only uncertainty. Then came the call. Satyam Computers had found him a contract, but in distant Brisbane. So once again, he packed his bags and followed opportunity north. And Brisbane became more than just work. It became home. There, he married Shamim, his longtime sweetheart, the one who had walked beside him through it all. Life in Brisbane had just begun to feel steady for Balan. He was working with Suncorp Bank until the news broke. The Satyam scandal shook the world, and just like that, his contract was suddenly over. He searched for work in Brisbane, but the market was silent. He had no choice but to look elsewhere. Then, opportunity knocked. From Melbourne, once again, he packed his bags. A new journey, a new city, a new life awaited for Balan. The streets of Melbourne full of rhythm and life. The trams, their gentle hum, became the soundtrack of his new beginning. Every stop, every corner, held an unknown adventure, waiting just for him. He stood, still, at the footsteps of history, Flinders Street Station, towering, timeless, a silent witness to the millions of journeys that began and ended there. Today, it watched him too, a stranger in a new land, ready to write his own story. Balan soon found a home, not just in a city, but in purpose. A small trading company, ShareWealth Systems, became the next chapter of his journey. A family-owned business built on trust, integrity, and ambition. And at its heart stood Gary Stone, a mentor, a guide, a friend. Gary welcomed him, supported him, and helped him settle into the rhythm of life in Melbourne. For that kindness, he would be forever grateful. It began with a single camera, a Canon 60D, his faithful companion for almost 10 years. Balan never traveled without it. The lens, always searching, always framing the perfect shot. Sometimes it tested the patience of his wife as Balan stood for hours, waiting for the perfect light, the perfect moment, the perfect photograph. Over time, the collection grew, more lenses, more gear, more passion. And then there was New Zealand. A single wave caught me hard and cold. His camera took the hit, soaked and silent. The shutter button froze, his lifeline gone. In that moment, Balan learned it's not the perfect shot that defines you, but the storms you survived. Balan buried the camera deep into raw rice somewhere. He had read that rice could draw out the moisture. He waited and hoped, because every picture, every memory was worth saving. There were places Balan went, moments he chased. His camera was his companion, his witness. Click by click, frame by frame, he captured the fleeting, the forgotten, and the timeless. And now he shares them with you. Balan shifted his passion from still frames to moving pictures. Searching for an affordable way to learn cinematography in Melbourne, he found none. So he walked into the Centre for Adult Education and walked out with a dream. The filmmaking process consumed him. With no guarantees, no roadmap, and no fear, he kept learning. Then came the bold decision to make his own feature film. He formed a team, held auditions, gathered what gear he could afford. He was unsure where the journey would lead, but he did not care. For him, not trying was the greatest failure of all. The cameras rolled, the dream began, and then the world stood still. COVID hit, lockdown swept Melbourne, and the king of lockdowns, Dan Andrews, ruled the empty streets. But the dream remained alive. But life was never just about cameras or lenses. There was another calling, quietly waiting, with a group of friends. Balan and Shamim formed a simple idea. They called it Care to Share. The mission was humble, but powerful. To collect unwanted yet still beautiful things, clothes, toys, books for children under 12. Children across the sea in villages of Malaysia, where even the smallest gift brings the brightest smile. There were public meetups, open calls, house-to-house visits, each item cleaned, folded, sorted with care and kindness. There are many good souls in Melbourne, people who give without asking anything in return. And so, box by box, love and compassion sailed across oceans, because sometimes the smallest gesture becomes the greatest gift of all. Sometimes inspiration doesn't come from grand ideas, it comes from the most ordinary places. There was a small pothole in the earth, just a shallow dent where rainwater gathered every time the skies opened up. And when it did, the birds would come. They'd drink, they'd dance, they'd bathe, like the whole world had paused just for them. That's when Balan thought, why not build a proper one? Not just a puddle, but a pond, a place for water to live, for life to flourish. He had never built one before. No prior experience, no blueprint, just a vision and a stubborn heart. But Balan had something better than expertise. He had a mentor. His name was Shankar, a friend from Malaysia, a man who'd shaped ponds with his own hands more than once. And together they began to dream, to sketch, to measure. They debated filters, the new age RDF or the old school proven combination of pre-filter and bead. They chose the latter, not because it was easy, but because it was reliable. Shankar refined the design, and Balan, he picked up the shovel. It wasn't glamorous, it was dirt, sweat, blisters. 3 months of digging, the old-fashioned way, just one man and a will that wouldn't bend. Every 2 or 3 weeks, Divin would fly in. Not a brother by blood, but a brother by heart. The kind of bond that doesn't need explaining, just a shovel and time. Sometimes the sun set before the work was done, but Balan kept going. Studio lights, once used for filmmaking, now lit the dirt, the tools, and the dream. Time was running out. Winter was coming, not just the season, but the kind that seeps into your bones and turns every shovel into a battle. Then came Jimmy, an artist of angles, and he lived 5 minutes down the road. Together they studied the blueprint and made it real. Pipes laid, valves tested, water's path set in motion. Jimmy brought the craft, Balan, the vision, and in between, understanding. Dreams are only as strong as their foundation, and in Balan's pond, the true foundation was the filter. 5 chambers, each one designed with purpose to keep the water clear and life thriving. He hired the concreters, precise, no shortcuts, because these chambers weren't just boxes, they were the heart of the system. Once poured, a waterproof membrane sealed every inch, a quiet guard against future leaks. And then, the final touch. Tiles, clean, deliberate, beautiful. Because even the hidden parts deserve to look good. It wasn't just construction, it was intention, and it was built to last. Then came the hardest part, the liner. One slip, one tear, and months lost. But he wasn't alone. Friends came, they stretched, tucked, held, and together, they made it fit. No creases, no air bubbles, just one seamless coat, like a dream finally wearing its skin. Now, most people might think it's done, but not yet. There was one last step, the boulders. They weren't just decoration, they were the bones of the waterfall. A crane was brought in, each stone lowered like it belonged to something ancient. One by one, the boulders were placed, not tossed, not rushed, but chosen, angled, balanced, turned with care. Every stone had a place, every edge had a reason. They weren't just stacked, they were composed. Because this wasn't just about building structure, it was about shaping silence. Then came the trial run. Water flowed, but not as expected. It splashed, scattered, wild and unshaped. So Balan did what he always does. He adapted. He ground the rocks himself, shaping the flow, sculpting silence into motion. And then the water flowed. Not wild, not loud, just right. Balan didn't smile, he just listened. Because sometimes the sound of water is enough and nothing more. And finally it was done, a place of stillness, of water, of peace. Balan now has a spot, before work, after work, to simply sit and breathe. And just like in the beginning, the birds returned, to drink, to shower, to remind him why it all began. Not with noise, but with presence. Not with answers, but with rhythm. Each flutter a whisper, each droplet a memory. They dip their beaks into still water, not just to drink, but to feel life ripple again. They fluttered, they showered, not out of need, but delight. Nature never rushed the healing. It simply waited for the return. A pothole once filled with rain is now a pond filled with purpose. Do you think Balan stopped there? Nah. He built another, a smaller one for his aquaponic system. Then a raised pond for quarantine. Each one with purpose, each one with care. And who knows, there may be more. The pond was done, the tools packed away, the quiet returned. But Balan, he wasn't done creating. With the world opening up again and COVID fading into memory, he returned to the thing that first stirred his soul, filmmaking. A new story began. Lights, lenses, scenes unfolding, one frame at a time. It's still in motion, still becoming, and all he hopes is that this time, nothing stops the camera from rolling. After the stillness of lockdowns, Balan found something new. Or maybe something ancient. He started hiking, not just walking, but climbing towards silence, sky, and something deeper. His first summit, Mount Kinabalu, Malaysia. Tough, majestic, unforgettable. And now he hopes to conquer a few more, while the body and the knees still say yes. Because every mountain is a reminder that there's always one more step to take. Balan never claimed to be just one thing. He's written code, held a camera, lifted stone, and shaped quiet corners of the world with his hands and his heart. He built a pond to give the birds a place to drink. He climbed a mountain to see if he still could. When things went wrong, he redrew the lines. When the world stood still, he found ways to move. Not for praise, not to be noticed, but simply because there was something inside him that wouldn't stay still. This is Balan's story so far, because like every good story, it's still being written. And to you, who stayed with this story till the end, thank you for listening.